Okay, so we are starting, and hello everybody, and thank you for joining. And people will continue joining. It's great to have so many people here on this phone call and or this Zoom. And this is not just a talk. This is an engaging, session with Q&A. So feel free to listen. And as you're listening, you'll see in the bottom of the screen an area that you can basically put your questions, and we'll try to get to all of the questions. So my name is Yair, and myself and Abby, who I'm going to introduce in a second, and other parents from the area were part of several different groups. And in this webinar series, we're basically, representing several organizations, including Wait Until 8. We're representing the Greater Philadelphia Digital Wellness Community, the Smartphone Free School Childhood group, and the PA Unplugged, Pennsylvania Unplugged, in addition to other organizations. And in this series of webinar, what we're really trying to do is to bring information to parents. And we're interviewing and hosting, different people, interesting people, both educators, teachers, and, psychiatrists, psychologists, experts in education in different aspects, experts in technology, authors, and more. So before I introduce Abby, this is going to be the first webinar of the year of 2026. And I promise you that it's going to be a fascinating conversation. And just before we start, the reason that we're doing all of this is really to educate and bring information and just bring people together and discuss these very important topics, because it's not so easy, in 2025 to raise kids and school with a lot of challenges, and there's a lot of questions always. Is it okay to bring a smartphone or a cell phone to our kids? At what age, if at all? What about social media? How do we limit it? What's the harm, if there are? And a lot of different topics. So these are kind of some of the things that we talk about. And I haven't said it for a while because we didn't have a webinar for a couple of months. But the two things that are really important is that the first one is that this is not we're not a cult of anti-technology. This is not some sort of weird that we don't believe in cell phones, we don't believe in AI or anything of that sort. And as example, myself, I'm a physician, but some of you know that I am very involved in the world of AI, and I consult for several startup companies, and I do believe in the importance of it. And the second point is when we talk about cell phones and children and social media, it's not about judgment. Again, we express what we think is right for our kids, and we want to learn more from the specialists and from the experts, but we're not trying to judge. Every family does whatever they think is right for them. So this is kind of like a little introduction that I do. And I'm going to introduce Abby. So Abby, I live in Greater Philadelphia in the suburbs, and Abby Rubin. She is a close friend of mine. She's also a mother of 4 with a professional background of occupational therapy and also nonprofit management. She has kids in both elementary and nursery schools. She's very passionate about healthy child development. She loves being part of the Lower Merion community, and it's really great to have you here, Abby. So thank you for joining us and co-moderating.
Thank you. Yeah, everybody, it's great to see so many names listed. I'm going to introduce Dr. Sigelman here, and I'm very excited to be part of this conversation because, as Yair said, we're on a journey here, learning more about our current times and distraction. So I'm very excited about this conversation. Dr. Asya Sigelman is Associate Professor of Ancient Greek at Bryn Mawr College. Her latest research project, Tragedies of Sophocles. In 2015, Asya and her husband Matt founded the Mainline Classical Academy, MLCA, in Bryn Mawr, a small academically rigorous private K-12 school specializing in math, ancient and modern languages, literature, and history. Asya regularly volunteers time at MLCA, where she wears several hats, including overlooking the humanities curriculum and teaching English literature class. So welcome, and to kind of kick us off and get this started, I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit about yourself beyond the bio that I just read. We're curious to hear and how you came.
How I came to the, sorry, you cut off a little bit, Abby.
I'm sorry, my connection doesn't love me. We're curious to hear about how you came to school and kind of what the journey you took was to get here.
Sure. So I would
To start.
point can you hear me? Is my connect? Yeah, I would point to our motto, the motto of the school, because children are never too young to learn great things. And really, Matt and I started with this very, very simple observation encapsulated in the motto. We both are incredibly fortunate and very grateful to our respective parents for getting us, each of us, respectively, through 12 grades of excellent private schools. I went to a very rigorous and high achieving Jewish day school in Boston. Matt attended a secular school in Brooklyn, which to this day is usually kind of at the top of the best schools in the USA. And so even as we benefited tremendously from those respective experiences, what we strongly felt and also saw in touring the schools in the Philadelphia area when we moved here in 2010 as young parents, that serious learning doesn't pick up until middle school, high school. And that, this sort of notion that like, hey, we're all, when are we learning reading, writing, and arithmetic? And when you look at kind of broadly at American education, whether we're talking about private schools or public schools, increasingly learning as such is getting pushed off to later and later grades. So there's a lot of kind of exploration and dabbling and doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that throughout the elementary school years, and lots of missed opportunities. So this very, very simple notion that our generations and generations of people from all cultures always knew that the younger we are, the easier and the more fun and the more fulfilling it is for us, for children, to master new concepts, to memorize mathematical concepts. It could be historical facts. It could be new poetry. And then as we get even a little bit older, even by middle school, it's much more difficult. So that's the foundational premise of the school, that let's start young. Let's start in kindergarten, when children's minds are so receptive. And so open to new cultural horizons, to the ancient world, to the modern world, to new languages, to mathematics, to history, and yeah, so that's kind of where we started.
Is this related at all to, but your career before you basically jumped into creating the school 10 years ago was more focused? Maybe tell us a little bit about your other, because I'm trying to make the connection. The ancient Greek professor that you are, and the teacher in college and university. Did you somehow make the connection from there?
Yeah, very much so. So people often ask me like, wow, how do you do all of this? So I'm very fortunate in that these seemingly different areas of what I dedicate my time to are actually, for me at least, are very organically interconnected. My daytime job, my profession in academia focuses on the ancient world, and specifically on the literature and the history and the poetry of the ancient world. And the way I conceptualize engagement with the ancient world, as well as with almost any other period in history, is it's time travel. You're exploring other times, other places, other people, and especially if you're able to do it on the level of language, if you're able to learn a new language. Then that just gives you a totally different level of engagement with this other culture. How did these people imagine colors or numbers or gender or time? Turns out that, French think about these things differently than modern Americans. Ancient Romans think about these things differently than the ancient Greeks. And so that's what I do in my professional life. And also, of course, as an academic, I teach college, and graduate level courses. And I love that. It's incredibly fulfilling. But something I'm painfully aware of is that often it's a little bit too late for those students. So if you're coming to college at the age of 18, if you're a 20-year-old or even more so graduate student, and you want to master new languages and be introduced to new literature, new literary cultural figures, and you've never done that because most mainstream schools out there don't prepare you for that. It's really, really, really difficult. I'll just finish this long answer by sharing a little scene that's really kind of burnt into my memory from my very first year at Bryn Mawr. I was teaching, we have a small graduate program, and I was teaching a seminar on Homer to the graduate students. And we were discussing Homer's poetic techniques. And a student approached me after class and he said, Professor, how do you want me to engage with this if I don't even know anything about English poetry? And that was just incredibly eye-opening for me. So this idea, not only as a parent, as a mother of 5 children, but also as an academic who works with older students, it's very, very important for me to bring this time travel to much, much younger students.
So this is interesting. I have a lot of follow-up questions and a lot of questions even about how you personally educated your 5 children, but I'll try to focus. So when you basically created the school 10 years ago, you and your husband, you founded it, and it kind of became a legend in the area. A lot of parents, I know many parents who send their kids there and they think it's amazing. But maybe tell us, what do you mean, or teach us what's the difference between the regular schools, let's say public schools wherever in the United States, versus classical school or classical teaching, classical academy. What is the word classical? Like, what are the main differences in your school that makes it different than other schools?
Okay, it's an excellent question. The term classical is a little bit loaded, and probably if I could go back 10 years, we might not have used it in our title. Back in the day, through the 1940s, 1950s, most education, K through 12 education in the United States and Europe looked actually very similar to what we do at MLCA. And I'll get to a more detailed analysis of that in a second. In the 1940s, 1950s, and then really powerfully in the wake of the cultural revolutions of the 1960s, that education started receding and all sorts of kind of newfangled pedagogical theories started to advance. I'm not going to get into terribly much detail on them, but I will say I'll be happy to if you in a follow-up question. But I will say that what we see in most mainstream private and public schools in America these days, that is the product of these kind of revolutionary new trends of the 40s, 50s, 60s, and then 70s. And some of those waves are still coming. So about 20, 30 years ago, there began this sort of micro renaissance across the United States, led primarily by Christian, both Protestant and Catholic families, of the classical education. And so what these families meant by by classical, was actually quite vague. It was, and this is why retrospectively, I regret actually that we used this title for our school. And again, I'll explain more about that in a second. But let me first explain kind of broadly what classical education means in present day America. And this renaissance is still going strong. I mean, if you Google classical schools in the greater Philadelphia area, there's Philadelphia Classical School in Center City. Regina Angelorum is an excellent Catholic school in Ardmore. I think they would also describe themselves as classical. Typically, what a classical school does is it has a fairly strong traditional values flavor, a fairly strong conservative flavor. They will, and there's definitely overlaps between us and them. They will usually have a strong focus on history. They often, but not always, will do Latin. And typically, and this is kind of where we really differ from them, they see education as specifically a path towards growing in one's faith. It's a Christian or Catholic sort of education. So to be sort of like to mature into a responsible, believing member of, sometimes it's like explicitly of this church. We recommend that, that your child goes through this education. So more often than not, there's a strong faith dimension to classical schools. So now I can share why we actually went with the label classical. We went with the label classical in a much, much more specific sense, in the way that I'm used to using it in my profession. My discipline of ancient Greece and Rome is called classics. And so it's classics in that very specific sense of the word. And so because it was very important for us to root our school in this tradition, going all the way back to the ancient world and picking up some of the best trends of Western and often European education, that's why we went with this name. I can try to summarize briefly how we are different from most of the broadly classical schools out there. As I said, we do share definitely some traits, and I have tremendous respect for the classical schools out there. I think they're doing excellent work. The first most obvious thing is we have a very strong emphasis on STEM, on math and science. We're very proud that our the STEM half of our program is led by a Princeton math PhD, and it's Dr. Sasha Fratkin, and she's just also a great role model. There's so much conversation about girls in STEM, getting girls into STEM, and that's we're incredibly fortunate to have Sasha as that role model. We make a point of kids participating in all sorts of math Olympiads, competitions, math counts, and likewise in science fairs, science Olympiads, and we're very proud of the results we achieve. Sadly, and again, I can get into the reasons if people are curious, but I'll hold off for now. In mainstream classical education, usually STEM is not front and center. It's not really privileged. The other way in which we're fundamentally different is our focus on languages. So often, not always, a classical school will offer Latin on one level or another. For us, languages are really front and center. I already kind of sort of hinted why, because we see mastery of foreign, modern and ancient languages as the best path towards the sort of time travel, cultural time travel that I was describing. We see languages as keys to treasure troves of other cultures, whether ancient cultures or modern cultures. And last but not least, I'll say we prize academic rigor. We expect a lot from our students. I think if you survey the classical schools around the United States, you'll find really a range of some being fairly relaxed, some being very rigorous, and we're definitely gonna on the we crave the kinds of students who will be inspired by the challenge, by the richness of our curriculum.
It's making me want to audit one of your classes as like a parent
Please,
grown up.
please, everyone on
sounds
this call is
really
warmly
interesting.
welcomed. Yeah.
So I have a question based on what you were talking about, balancing the traditional classical classics with STEM and other sort of very modern subjects. I'm curious, I think many of us are, how you use technology, whether that be smart boards or devices one-to-one, and how you assess and determine what technology is working.
Sure. So as I wholeheartedly subscribe to what Yair was saying earlier, like we're not anti-technology. We're very aware that we live in the 21st century. Our general sort of school philosophy on just even like the internet broadly is I usually use the following metaphor. The internet is actually very analogous to kind of the Atlantic Ocean in the Great Age of Exploration. So when Europeans figured out how to build big ships and sail to around the world, the internet and all the various the apps and the devices and whatever can take you to truly amazing places. But that requires significant knowledge and responsibility because otherwise it's incredibly, it can be incredibly dangerous, or you could just lose your way. So I think that's an accurate analogy. In terms of technology in classes, we believe that when it's necessary, we use it. That seems like a silly response. But when one really kind of stops and thinks about like when do students need technology, it's actually very rare. So like in our language classes, our teachers occasionally show videos because it's really great to kind of hear French audio, or sometimes even like Latin podcasts. In our art history classes, as you can imagine, it's very helpful to see big reproductions of paintings or statues. Now, even there, we don't have smart boards. We wouldn't allocate our limited funds towards fancy technology like that. I mean, we literally have like very cheap screens that we have some school laptops, and the teachers plug in a laptop, and there's Michelangelo or whatever. So it's very, very basic. There's some science fair related activity, and we also have a robotics club, and we have like 12 school laptops that students can check out under school supervision and use. I'm just trying to think like where else. Oh, so a small exception to the rule is our math program. It's all on paper in the school. But we use an excellent curriculum called the Beast Academy. If you're not familiar with it, definitely look it up. It's an amazing curriculum, Beast Academy. And they have a truly phenomenal online component. I was actually initially a little bit skeptical about it, but then our math teacher quickly convinced me. So often for homework, students may be, or like for summer work, students may be assigned Beast Academy online. But generally nighttime homework or work in the classroom is all on paper. So yeah, that's, I don't know if that answered your question.
It does. I have a follow-up that I didn't expect to ask, but what kind of field trips do you take, or how are field trips utilized? How is we live we're very fortunate to live so close to so many things. I'm curious how you bring those things either into the classroom or bring the classroom out.
Sure, yeah. So when we were much smaller, we started in 2010 with 4 students. And then we grew little by little. So we did tons of field trips. What we still do, some wonderful field trips, and I'll talk about them in a second. I will say that every time that a teacher proposes a field trip, I'm always conflicted. And I usually say yes, but I'm conflicted because our, every day is saturated with learning. And I can talk a little bit more about the day-to-day structure of our classes. And it's a very, very rich web of classes and learning. And to start kind of pulling that apart and saying, no, we're going to take half a day and go to, Museum of Fine Art, it's always a sacrifice. So usually we make it work. But it's a good conflict to have. So what kind of field trips do we do? So, our second and third graders next month are going to the Philadelphia Museum of Art. I no longer know what it's called, by the way, because they just changed their name. So they've been doing a unit on ancient Egypt, with our art history teacher, and they're gonna be looking at some cool things there. Last year, we actually often do trips to New York, both for art history. We did the David Caspar Friedrich exhibit at the Met in New York last year. A bunch of students also went with our math teacher to the Museum of Math in Manhattan. We have a very rich science and hands-on skills program for little ones. And with kids, just like in general, they spend a lot of time outdoors. We have a school garden, vegetable garden that they cultivate. We have a nature trail that the students developed and help maintain. They tap maple trees. But in addition to that, we also organize all sorts of like hands-on nature field trips to the Wissahickon and so forth. So yeah, there's probably something I'm forgetting, but that should kind of give you an overall sense. Oh, and for our older students, we've had some really wonderful trips to lectures at Villanova. Some of them kind of focused on American civics, American history. So there's been a bunch of those as well.
I want to ask your opinion about something, Asia. And this is about something that is kind of growing momentum, and even in the last few months, both in Pennsylvania, but states all over the United States. And this is related to the distractions, specifically of cell phones, of smartphones, of children who bring them to class, to school. And just recently, we're from Pennsylvania, and just a few weeks ago, in the Committee of Education in the Senate here in Pennsylvania, they passed unanimously legislation or initiation of legislation related to bell to bell, meaning that at the beginning of the day, you turn off your cell phone or you give it, and you're not allowed access anymore until the end of the day. And we saw the same thing just a few weeks ago, I think a week and a half ago in New Jersey. That is now, the legislation is final, and Governor Murphy is reviewing it as we speak. And, 2 weeks ago, we heard from all the school district of Pittsburgh, for example. Not only did they started a bell to bell, but it's even bus to bus. So from the moment that you're on the bus, you shouldn't be on your phone. And there's a lot of research and studies about it. We had some authors and researchers discussing it. But what is your personal opinion as a head of school, as a founder, and as an educator, both in college and also, in your school, in your classical academy? And not only what is your opinion, but do you have any specific policies in your school, or what do you do about distractions and phones?
Yeah, no, it's a great question that we've thought a lot about. So K through 8, our students are actually not supposed to have their own smartphones, and we have all parents sign a commitment to that effect. There's some other things on the commitment as well, just like generally limiting screen time, like piano practice is on the commitment because we offer piano to all students K through 4, and then possibly even past that for interested students. But that's really kind of a central part of the parent commitment, that students the parents will not give students their own smartphones at least through 8th grade. And then 9th grade and up, we have a small high school. We still don't recommend smartphones. We recognize that many of our high schoolers will have them, but we don't want to see them on campus. And like, if we see them, they get confiscated, and, parents have to stop at the school and pick them up. As you said, every family is different. Every family has different dynamics. Like, there's some parents out there who don't come home till very late at night or whatever, in a different time zone. And, how do I get in touch with my kid? So we do have those conversations, and we try to accommodate, as much as we can. Like, I'll give you an example. 2 years ago, we had a father who was like saying, I know you have a policy against Apple smartwatches because they essentially can do a lot of what a phone can do. But my child is on this bus for like several hours a day, and this is the only way I can reach her. And so we came to a creative sort of agreement with him where she comes to school, she drops off her watch at the front office. Generally, I think you'll find that most of our parents are incredibly appreciative of this policy because, as is well known, the most difficult things with smartphones and social media is that there's tons of peer pressure on the students and therefore on the parents. So when your kid comes home and says like, Mom, why am I the only one without a phone in my class? I'm left out of all activities, puts tremendous pressure on the parents. So we've created this sort of protected space, protected community where, at least all of your friends at MLCA are exactly in the same situation as you are. And it's an incredible help.
And what is just to ask more from your personal experience, you've been an educator, a professor at a college for over how many years have you been doing this?
15
15
years.
years. Have you seen the difference, let's say 15 years ago when the smartphones basically just started and, 10 years ago, social media, Instagram started and, as we're evolving now to the reels or the short videos,
Yeah.
what do you see in class? Like now I'm not asking you about your school. I'm talking about your
Yeah.
college, your university professor job.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say I don't know that it's just the smartphones. I definitely see deterioration. I've enacted a very strict no laptops policy in my classes at Bryn Mawr College because I was teaching a lecture course a couple of semesters ago, and like literally, I was just facing a wall of laptops. I couldn't even see the kids' faces. So I said, like, no, like, I make a huge deal about it in my syllabus. And I think that ultimately students appreciate it as well. In terms of specifically smartphones, a very, almost like a funny, nasty side effect is there's this constant urge to check. And hey, like, I think I'm as guilty of this as my students. So it's very natural. But, I say something and right away, like somebody, or sometimes several people in the class, I can see they start whipping out their phones and checking. And it's also very off-putting for me. Like, are they checking me? Do they not trust me? So I have to like remind myself, this is normal. This is the world we live in. But it also takes a, like in some way, I think they're doing that because they've been taught to, kind of trust but verify. But it also pulls them out of the conversation in the classroom. They start getting distracted. They start saying, "Hey guys, did you see? There's a video here about this." And it just devolves, and the level of the discussion devolves. So I definitely, yeah. I mean, I don't think I'm saying anything that pretty much faculty around the globe would not do. And I will also say that I feel like we're like even past that problem. I think now we're in this totally new problem of AI. So I don't even want to open that can of worms unless you guys want to. But that's really what right now. That's the next frontier for colleges, college education.
So a follow-up question to what you said, and again, about the college and the college kids, because you mentioned very briefly that you don't know if it's related to the phones or to the technology or the laptops, but the college kids that you're teaching over the years have changed and maybe their concentration has declined. And we're hearing it from a lot of teachers, including
Yep.
school, college professors, researchers. So maybe tell us a little bit more about that and why do you think that that's the case? Because it's happening even when you're not allowing smartphones or laptops in the class. So what has changed over the last 15 years that you see this difference?
Sure. I mean, I think one thing that this technology does to all of us is it speeds up the pace of life. In some ways, that's wonderful. And in some ways, it's a trap. Everything has to get faster, 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 and therefore shorter, shorter, shorter. And so I think it's not, there's been a lot of interesting neurological studies done on kind of the effect of scrolling and screens and social media on human brains and teenage brains. But it's also this, there's just this expectation, like fast, 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 hurry, hurry, hurry. And again, I can share, as a professor, I always get anonymous course evaluations from my students after every course, every semester. And I've been teaching this 2-semester sequence of Introduction to Ancient Greek, which is like probably one of the hardest courses at Bryn Mawr, because it's a very complicated and inflected language. And I always tell students, hey, like if you can power through this, then you'll ace medical school, law school, whatever you guys want to go on to do. And to this day, I often get wonderful students in that course. But I remember this amazing complaint I got a couple of years ago in one of my course evaluations about this course. And it read like this. Again, it's an anonymous report, but here's what the students shared. She said, Professor Sigelman told us that we need to invest a minimum of 2 hours of homework a night to learn ancient Greek. And she was right. And I thought that this kid is praising me, and it turned out that she's complaining. She's like, how could she do this to us? And I'm like, so even just this notion that like, hey, this is challenging. The professor warned you, you signed up for this. Now you're going to roll up your sleeves and you're going to set aside 2 hours. Is just kind of completely mind-boggling, and I think the students actually use the term soul-crushing. But because it's everything is like fast, 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 fast. How can life expect of me that there would be this huge input of effort on my part? I mean, we also like similarly. I'm supposed to teach a course next fall on like a survey of epic from the ancient world, like from Gilgamesh and Homer down to the present day. And I'm already agonizing because if you look at older syllabi of similar courses, like you could expect a college student to read, I don't know, 100, 200 pages a week. You can't expect that anymore. So more likely they will, watch summaries on TikTok or something.
And like you said, the AI is going to summarize and the
The
GPT
AI
and
is going to summarize. Exactly. Exactly. So I'm trying to kind of re-articulate my role. How do I grab these students and stick their nose into the text? If at least if it's only just for the duration of the class, just to kind of to slow them down.
it's really tough. I mean, when I'm thinking about it, it's an issue that is relevant for me also. I mean, I used to years ago sit down with a paper on the weekend and read the whole thing, but
Hmm.
now you're on the train and I'm on the cell phone and I'm reading something interesting on the cell phone, but it has a hyperlink to the next article. So after
Yeah.
I get bored after a few sentences or a few after this 2 minutes, and I go to the next one and I go to the next one, and that's kind of like everything is very fast, like you said, and superficial. Let alone
Hmm.
just listening to an amazing podcast today about the damage of the reels or the short videos of how people are like you go fast, 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 and you're thinking that you're learning, but it's just moving to the next one, and it's
Yeah.
very superficial. So I agree with
Yeah.
what I can see why it's happening. Abby,
I have a question that's pivoting away from this, although it all kind of connects. So, the Pennsylvania State Standardized Assessments are going to be computerized as of the spring of 2026, and I'm just curious how or if the Mainline Classical Academy, because it's voluntary for private schools, I believe,
Yes.
to take. I'm just curious how you're navigating that.
Yeah. So okay. So we actually in our early days we did a bunch of that testing, and we moved away from it precisely because it's optional. We discovered that it was just sucking, like days, if not weeks and weeks of our students' time, without necessarily huge benefits. I will share, however, that we're actually big believers in AP, advanced placement courses and exams for our high schoolers. And I don't know if you guys know this, but the APs have all gone digital as of last spring. So that's something that we definitely coach our bigger students on. But even in our lower school, there's things like some of the math competitions that are online. So as I said, I mean, this is life. We live in a technological world. We don't, in principle, have objections to things online. We just want to avoid needless screen exposure. And then, again, as I said before, once you articulate it that way, you realize that there's a lot of needless screen exposure as well. I remember when we first, like when we first moved to Philadelphia, or maybe this was in like 2015. We were there were some schools that were incredibly enthusiastic because they got some huge loan and like they could provide a laptop to each student. And I was reading about this and like, why is this such a great thing? Like, why do these kids need this? So that's a sort of needless screen exposure that I'm talking about.
So that's my next question from there is, when you do provide technology, do you have some kind of computer lab, like a physical space devoted for this purpose? Do students have, I think you had said that there were some laptops that could be rented or sort of checked out in like a library
Sure.
fashion. How does that work? And how do you determine when it's, necessary?
Sure. So I should say we don't have a computer lab. We're actually we're fortunate to have a lovely campus in Bryn Mawr, very green, very bucolic, only about like 6-minute drive from Bryn Mawr Hospital and also the college, but very, very beautiful part of town. But beyond that, we're actually big believers in channeling all of our financial resources towards excellent teachers. And, we keep our facilities and administrative expenses as low as possible. So no needless spending. So definitely don't have a computer lab. Basically in the front office, we have a little shelf with something like 12 to 15 laptops, and the students can check them out. And again, for K through 8, it's really for special situations like a robotics lab, if they're doing a math competition online, some of the French audio or French audio testing. But it's really far and few between. And then for the high schoolers, there's a little bit more of that. For example, for AP, there's actually a really powerful resource that I'm a big fan of, which is called AP Classroom, for any AP course. So we do make use of that. So the high schoolers have a little bit more freedom and a little bit more time, but still very, very limited on the laptops. I'd be very happy to talk at it, but I'll follow your lead on this about physical printed books and the power of physical printed books. So that's something we have a lot of thoughts about, but I'll wait to see what other questions you guys have.
So actually, I was interested in something else, but this is a really important question, and what you commented on the printed books, and generally what we're hearing from parents and educators, especially educators who work in public schools, who are moving, maybe middle school, who are moving more and more to computers, and that most of the work is done on the computers. They are reading less printed books, but also writing less. Like, so even their math, instead of, using a pen and paper to kind of like to go through the thought process and use the hand-eye coordination, they just go basically to the computer. And maybe others will say that it's not so bad. But as an educator, I wanted to ask you exactly about what you said. Maybe you can go more about your thoughts and insights about the importance of printed books and also writing, like with a pen or paper.
So we're big believers in traditional paper books and textbooks. Though we have a very special attitude towards textbooks. We try when possible to avoid like your standard, like enormous, heavy, school textbooks. As I was explaining, even our math textbook series is very, very unique. Beast Academy is nothing like your standard textbooks. But long story short, paper books are we believe are like the best tool of learning, and as is handwriting. And there's been a lot of some really, really interesting scientific, neurological, psychological research done on this about how just humans in general, especially students, young humans, how we absorb knowledge, information better when we write it by hand. So those studies are out there. We actually have a very strong focus on handwriting, including cursive handwriting, in the lower grades. What we find is that some students really take to that. Some students kind of slave through it and then kind of go back to chicken scratch. And, it is what it is. But it is something that we really strive to, at least introduce our students to in the younger grades, all the way through, 5th grade. The one fascinating discovery that I made, and I actually haven't seen anyone talk about this, is how Amazon and online books and print-on-demand books have completely eroded our as a society awareness of of kind of the power of publishing houses and like good power and editions and authoritative editions. So I don't know if you guys have ever had this experience of going on Amazon to order a well-known title. I don't know, like Mary Poppins or Jack London, or I don't know, like something that usually that doesn't have a copyright on it anymore. And often, if you're not super careful, what you'll get in the mail is essentially like this cheap print-on-demand version that has like no paragraph breaks, no like horrible spelling mistakes, not clear where or how or why it was printed, no edition. And my understanding is that this is just like Amazon taking, what is this device that they use? Kindle, taking Kindle and just plugging it into a printer, and it just prints out totally unauthoritative text. And some years ago, I was teaching English literature to a bunch of our sixth graders, and I placed an order for, I think it was like Tale of Two Cities, and the Dickens novel, and I got a bunch of these in the mail, and I was totally horrified by this. And so I went on Amazon, I started looking for respectable authoritative editions, and I discovered that the website, Amazon, makes it very, very difficult to know what text you're ordering. And it was very eye-opening to me, because I think what we as a society are forgetting is how important an edition is. Like, is this Norton Classical Edition? Is this Penguin Press? Is this Random House? Because what that means is that somebody with knowledge, with erudition, with authority, is checking the text and comparing different versions. And for some authors, that's more important than others. Like, for example, Shakespeare, we have like 40 versions of King Lear. And like somebody, some scholar and some editor is taking authority for that, and then presenting that to readers. And so, again, I was kind of horrified by this, and I made a point, like, if we're ordering books for MLC students, for our literature classes, they must come from a recognized authoritative edition. Usually we use Norton Academic Press. That comes with commentary and sort of like essays and whatnot. But again, I think it's just a testament to how our society is kind of like moved away from the printed word at all. Like we just don't even think about like what is an edition? What do we mean when we talk about edition?
Yeah, but you know what? I just have to say that, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but to be the devil's advocate, which I'm a big believer, or I love Kindle. I love Kindle because, again, this shows that we're not some sort of a weird anti-technology. I use Kindle all the time. I love reading. I barely watch any TV or stuff. And the reason that I love Kindle is I'm fluent in 3 languages and I speak a few others. But sometimes I don't understand words. And when I love the fact that on Kindle, you can basically, for some words that are complicated, I'm not sure what it is, you just click it and you see, you know, the meaning and everything else. It has so many other advantages. If you have a Kindle, no matter where you are in the world, and an internet connection, you can connect to your library, you connect to this, you can just basically get all the books in the world. You can read it, you know, on the beach with a little thing, not this, but a Kindle. It's really ink. I think it's like, it's one of the most amazing technology. It's ink that is moving around. So I've not read, like, I love reading books, but I haven't read a full paper book, you know, and also I'm getting older, so my eyes, you just basically change the size of it instead of so I think still that Kindle or basically electronic books can have an advantage.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think it's one of those incredible inventions that I think we're very, very lucky to have. I will say pedagogically, I would even like if we had the unlimited financial means to provide our students with Kindles, I wouldn't do it. I would still force them. Many of them have Kindles at home, but I would still have them work with a paper copy. And I'll share 2 other sort of pedagogical techniques that are important for us. So one is annotating in the text. Now, my understanding is that you can do that with a Kindle, but still, as we were saying, there's something about holding a pencil or a pen and writing in the margins, highlighting, marking the teachers, making notes on the teacher's lecture, but also your own thoughts. And we actively teach the kids to do that, to read actively is one way that annotating is called. The other thing that's interesting that you mentioned, like clicking on words for meaning, which I totally see the benefits of that. One thing we sort of like torture our students with a little bit is paper dictionaries. And again, I'm a big believer in paper dictionaries. They, again, very eye-opening to me that my graduate students, so like 25, 30-year-olds, feel uncomfortable with the paper dictionary. Why? Because you have to have that knack of going alphabetically. because we're also used to just clicking. Like you don't have to think about alphabetical order. And it's the beauty of engaging with a dictionary because you see close derivatives. You see the words around it, and so that's something we have our students in certain grades play around with quite a bit. It's laborious. It's like doing long division. Eventually you can switch to a calculator, but first you have to learn to do it.
So interesting. It's so interesting because some of these things, you don't even remember learning them, but as you're speaking about it, remember that. It's really important to get the foundational skills. So we're going to go to some of the questions that people have asked in the chat. If anybody has any other questions, please feel free to ask them in the Q&A box. One question that somebody asked, this is from P. Fletcher. Do you think universities will go away from phones and computers? Do you think that there will be some kind of shift, broadly speaking? As you said, you have your own class rules, but do you think this is something that you see as a trend?
I don't know. I was just having this conversation this morning with some faculty at our school. What I do know is that things will change at the universities, and it's actually even less about like the screens and more about AI. And again, an amazing, powerful tool, but it's wreaks complete havoc with writing, all whether K through 12 or in universities. More likely than computers going away, what people have predicted will happen is that universities will develop some sort of interface that kind of sort of like locks you in so you can't go to AI, and like you can at least like as long as you're kind of tapped into the university network or whatever, like you're it's almost like a testing sort of interface. But I don't know. I just know that we are in this almost like we're living through a very interesting historical moment right now when AI is posing this enormous challenge to writing as we've always understood it.
It's so interesting because as an occupational therapist, my background, one of the things we talk about with handwriting, people often think handwriting is just sort of legibility or penmanship, but handwriting is it's a full body sport, and you need to have the shoulder strength and the elbow strength and the mobility, but it's also the pressure grading. And so, often people use styluses on screens, like to kind of to jot down notes. And some of the shows that that's not as effective when it comes to retention, like, content retention, note taking, because you're not getting the feedback, the sensory feedback that you would on a paper, whether you use a pencil or a pen or a crayon or a marker or chalk, whatever that might be, you get such different feedback. And it's interesting because I think of college as sort of, these people have, they've transcended, they're so much older, and yet you're seeing the same kind of challenges that people, I think, K through 12 are feeling too. So it's teachers seeing in K through 12 as well. I'm going to turn it over to Yair now.
Any comments, Asya, about what Abby just mentioned about the writing? Because we hear a lot about it. We hear from a lot of teachers that they feel that the fact that the kids are moving into, an era of more one-to-one Chromebooks or different tablets, etc., it is diminishing their ability to write, like Abby was saying. And how does it affect, like, what are your thoughts of how it's affecting not only the physical whole body, like Abby was saying, but also, like, what, in addition or differently than typing and being on the computer, how does it add to the developing mind and brain to just basically write and draw and use your fingers and pen?
I can't speak as much to the sort of like the full body. Like it makes total sense to me what Abby's describing. It's harder for me to speak to that, except to like share what I mentioned earlier, that we find that because our society is so like not geared towards handwriting, some of our students really embrace what we teach them with handwriting, but some move away from it. After it stops being mandatory, like in 6th grade and up, they just, like instead of the beautiful cursive that we teach them, they just go back to like their original chicken scratch. So it's a very interesting regression that I've seen with many of our students over the years that I wouldn't have guessed would necessarily happen if you asked me 10 years ago. But I will say that yes, I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with the general sense that, and again, that's why, notwithstanding the benefits of Kindle, I am such a fan of paper books because you're one-on-one with, like, it's almost like you're having this conversation with the author. You're one-on-one, face-to-face, with this author. So I don't know, you're reading Robinson Crusoe or whatever. It's like, oh wow, Daniel Defoe, like, what did you just do here? Hey, let me mark this up. Let me record my thoughts. But as soon as you open this up technologically, even if you're technically sort of going through similar emotions with the stylus on a screen, there's so much distraction and pop-ups and clicking and like that magic of that kind of deep one-on-one conversation with an author with a text, or it can be a math problem. It dissipates.
Sorry, this is really interesting. So I'm going to ask two questions of Valerie. So first of all, she was interested technically in what is the class size and the teacher to student ratio. And then she's talking about she's basically mentioning, Valerie, that she loves the idea of teaching Latin in school. And, but she's also asking, she says that some people would say that Latin is a dead language because nobody really is speaking it. And I know that we're talking before about screens, but going back to the content of what you teach. So why do you think that Latin, for example, is something that you are passionate about in teaching? So do you think is it a dead language? What are the benefits of studying it? Is it purely for the Latin, or is it because of the brain development and different directions that the kids is, learning and absorbing a language that's so different and so beautiful in many ways?
I would say both. Again, I've alluded several times in this conversation to kind of the key role that the historical dimension plays at MLCA. In general, I think if you were to ask me like, hey, Asia, what do you think is like the one central problem or challenge in the modern American education landscape? There's many, but I might choose lack of historical dimension. When you look at kind of how mainstream American K through 12 education evolved over the course of the 20th century to the present day, we've gone increasingly less and less and shallower and shallower and shallower historically. There's a fascinating little article that I can share afterwards, Yair, and you can send it out to participants, written by a historian of American education, Diane Ravitch, where she asks, like, what is social studies? Like, I'm guessing that most people on this call, that you're in your kids' schools, that they offer social studies, but they may not offer history, or at least they may not offer history to like high school AP elective level. So Diane Ravitch asks, like, what is social studies? And she shows that it's this it sort of came out of nowhere. She calls it sociology for tots. That in the first half of the 20th century, American students were introduced to this treasure trove of historical figures and battles and kings and villains and legends and mythology, and ballads, and lyric, and, who's Robin Hood, who's Henry IV, who's Emperor Vespasian, and on and on and on. And it's these vistas into other times and places, and just how cool is this time travel? And that's what was standard in American and in European schools. And then in America, I think a little bit less so in Europe, again, starting in the 60s, all of this started receding. And instead, especially on the elementary middle school level, this sort of like vague sociological thing, social studies, sort of made an inroad instead. Why am I saying all of this? This is a very long answer to this question, like, why Latin? Latin opens a window into the historical origins of our society, into the historical origins of the language that we speak every day, English, into the historical origins of our culture. It adds this, again, it adds this historical perspective to who we are. I'll give you one example among an infinity. So we all know the word virtue, right? Virtue. So a fun fact is that these days we can just like throw it around. It's not a super common word, but I think we all use it occasionally. I think if like we were asked like, hey, historically, what does virtue mean? Probably we would say, like I feel like in the olden days we associated with specifically with women, like very like female chastity, like being a faithful wife. That's virtue. But a fun fact is that at the root of the word virtue sits the word vir, which in Latin means man. And so virtue originally virtus had nothing to do with women. It meant manliness, courage. So being a good soldier on the battlefield. And then it kind of migrated and evolved. And so that's just like one tiny illustration of how there's this treasure trove of identity, of historical layers, of who are we? What is this language that we speak? What is this culture that we exist in? And Latin is one way to open that up for. There are other ways for sure as well. I mean, we could teach, I don't know, medieval Arabic or ancient Greek or, I don't know, medieval Chinese. Like there's different ways of doing this. We chose Latin and I can get into some more details on that. But that's why ancient languages are important for us.
I just kind of comment before Abby takes the next question is that as part of my love to Kindle, what I was telling you before is when I see difficult and complicated and long words that I'm not familiar with, whenever I click on the Kindle to learn about it and go to the dictionary, not only that I learn but what I'm really interested is going down because it says what's the origin of the word. Is it a Greek ancient word? Is it related to Old French from the 15th century? That is like the evolution of the words into what they are now is fascinating. Abby.
This is so interesting. So there's another question that somebody asked that's a nice segue. Emily Hammer asked, what's the role of dialogue and oral assessment at your school and in your conception of education more generally, including at Bryn Mawr? So speaking of language, very interested to hear this.
I would say that simply by eliminating screens when they're not necessary, like that's the first step towards human dialogue. And I say this to my college students, like when I read the syllabus to them and I say, hey guys, this is going to be a screen-free class. Why? Not because I begrudge you your screens, but because I want to see you face to face and I want you to see each other face to face. This is any classroom is a community. We talk with one another. We don't stare at a screen. So that's sort of first and foremost. Specifically at MLCA, dialogue, public speaking, oral presentations are all super important. We have a lovely debate club that's been a perennial favor. Actually, this year it's not running, but it's been a perennial favor that we're going to bring back with our students. For our younger students, we also offer something called the Good Life class, which actually sort of pushes off of some, classical text, sort of in the broad sense of the word. There's like a little bit of Aristotle and Greek mythology and some modern literature, but mostly it's in fact a conversation and dialogue class about like what does it mean to live the good life? What is the path of virtue, so to speak? So all of that. And then the last piece I would add specifically on this, less about dialogue, but also super important, is poetry recitation. So a cornerstone of our English language and literature program is poetry ranging from Shakespeare through Milton, through Tennyson, and into the 20th century. And a big part of engaging with poetry is reciting it and reciting it by heart. Twice a year, we gather for a poetry evening where every student gets up in front of a big auditorium with a microphone and recites a poem by heart. And it's always a very inspirational evening. But so even though that's not dialogue, it's memorized recitation, that committing of this meaningful and beautiful text and multi-layered text to memory kind of stays with you. And because the students memorizing are so young, I'm going to say it's going to stay with them for many, many years, if not for their whole lives, and something they're going to carry through with them.
Next question is from P. Fletcher, and I think it's an interesting one. It's a short one, but And this is based on your experience as an educator, professor in the university, but also your exposure to children in the school in the last 15 years. Do you see a difference? Can you see a difference between kids or teenagers or kids who are now in college who were raised on phones slash screens, tablets, versus kids who were more, their parents were more restrictive and more, enforcing no screens, more books, etc.? Do you feel a difference?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I will say that this actually gets back to the question about dialogue and human communication. Um, Maybe I might tweak almost like the opposition a little bit. It's less about like books versus screens, though you can tell like my heart is with the books versus the screens. But I would actually say that what makes a huge positive difference, it's not that opposition, but screens versus human conversation versus human interaction. So like does this child come from a family where they have an opportunity to sit down for a meal as a family every night and just talk screen free, to read together, I don't know, to go for a jog together and talk, to walk the dog together and talk. So it's that, again, it's that face to face, thoughtful and loving and meaningful and human interaction that I think is possibly even more important than good books. But of course, like if the interaction is about books, how amazing is that?
So I have a question that no one asked, although the questions that have been asked have been wonderful. I think a lot of them have been touched on. Some of them have been comments, which have been really great to read. I'm curious if you have new students joining who have been more accustomed to a screen-heavy education, how does their transition go? How does that work? How does that look?
Yeah, so it's always a challenge for us. Again, it's a little less the reliance on screens. Like we don't see that as nearly it's not the device itself. Rather, it's a little bit more of the other issues we've talked about, like attention span. Like, is this a child who is ready, willing, and able to plow through a 400-page novel in the course of, I don't know, 2 months? Is this a child who is enthusiastic about going to a museum exhibit on, I don't know, French Impressionism? Is this a child who, I don't know, is really, really eager to learn all about the Napoleonic era? Or is this the sort of kid who just wants to hang out, play video games, and like, I don't know, text with friends? Like that. So that's really the dichotomy. So again, yes, the latter will definitely be more screen heavy, but it's more about that like deep, curiosity, passion for opening new horizons, new cultural horizons. That's really kind of what we're looking for. So we're not a school for every student, but there are students out there who want that deep and meaningful and purposeful education, and we're the school for them.
This has been so interesting, and we have a few more minutes. One of the questions oops, my Q&A won't stand up. There we go. Wait a second. Sorry. My Q&A is not happy right now and it keeps jumping around. Excuse me. Okay. One of the questions that somebody had asked was how to build 21st century skills. The question is, she doesn't believe this personally, but there's a huge push for building 21st century skills, quote unquote. And some might say that they need to build these skills from a young age, which is one of the sort of arguments for having very involved technology, kind of from the jump, from K through 12, how you get around that idea and what you think about that.
So I would respond with a question, kind of how do we define 21st century skills? So I can pause there. I don't know if the person asking wants to provide any sort of answer that, because I think that's really the crux of the matter.
Well, I think that we hear this a lot, and I think it's very reasonable. But when people are referring to skills of the 21st century, is for example, to be familiar with how to use cell phone, that the world is communicating with social
Sure.
media. Some of the news are on social media, that, that's how most of the interaction, most of the people, like it or not, most of the people on the train, they're on the cell phone doing something. That the AI is now something that is like, if you are staying behind and not using it, then, you're basically in a significant disadvantage. So these are some of the examples. I think that they're,
Sure. Yeah, that's what I assumed. So what I would respond is that I, I'm I'm not convinced that the term skills is the right way to describe this. Because in my definition of skill, it is in fact something that you have to labor at to acquire. All of this modern technology, whether it's AI, whether it's I mean, it all overlaps. It's all like one. Whether it's the smartphone, whether it's social media, apps, whatever, is all designed to do the work for you. I don't know that it's terribly controversial for me to say that, you know, even somebody who was never exposed to this would probably easily pick up this technology in a month max, maybe much shorter. Um, I can share that my 80-something-year-old mother-in-law who lived her whole life without a smartphone got one a couple of years ago and has been happily glued to it ever since. So, it's all of this technology kind of its whole sort of almost like raison d'etre is to to take the onus off of us to do everything for us. So again, I want to push back a little bit on even like applying the label of skill to this.
and I agree. I think that it's as AI will, even when you're talking about coding, things are changing so rapidly. It used to be maybe a year or 2 years ago that a person still needed to code, but at this point with vibe coding and all the AI, you can just basically talk, and the machine, you don't need any skills. You
Yeah.
basically tell the machine as the AI is evolving, you just tell what you want it to do, and it does it for you. Um, I say this has been an amazing, session, and so interesting. Questions were great, and we appreciate everybody joining. I wanted to end with one last question. A lot of parents here or people who are going to be watching this session are not going to take their kids to your school, maybe because they're from California or New York or Boston. But maybe you can share with us, based on your experience as a professor of ancient Greek, working with college students, building this amazing school that you built, being the head of the school. Maybe you can share insights with us. What are your suggestions to parents, maybe kids who are 4 years old, 6 years old, 10 years old, on maybe tips to, for parenting that you think that can make a big impact on the kids and the relationship between the parents and kids?
Sure. Yeah. I would say two things. Most importantly, spend time with your child, with your children, face to face time, no screens. As I was saying earlier, that's actually the most important thing. It doesn't matter what you're doing, riding a bike, going to a museum, sitting in a cafe. But if you have the capacity to bring a good book into that relationship, saying like, hey, I don't know, let's read Robinson Crusoe together. Let's discuss it together. So to bring that kind of one-on-one. I was talking earlier about a one-on-one engagement with a novel, with a book, with an author. But you can open that up to a parent-child pair, and bringing in a good book into that relationship is just a truly amazing sort of and very, very affordable and easy thing to do. And we always encourage our MLCA parents, like, please spend time at home reading with your kids. And we're always happy to make recommendations, kind of grade by grade. And then the second suggestion I have, which I don't think is as actually important as the first one. The first one I'd say is the most important. Kind of building that human contact with your child screen free, if possible, bringing in good books into the conversation. And then the third is if you think your child can handle it, challenge them, challenge them, challenge them, challenge them, because children are never too young to learn great things.
This is great advice and great tips. Well, thank you again, Asia. Thank you again, Abby,
Thank you so
for
much.
helping. And thank you, everybody, for joining. And sorry that we didn't get a chance to finish all the questions. And we will share the recording of this session on the email and social media. So thank you, everybody, for joining. And good night, all.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.